Good morning. I first walked into this room almost 8 years ago to the day, not as an FDA employee, but rather as a state employee with the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. I was here to receive training on how to conduct acidified food inspections. And for those of you who are not familiar with the subject, acidification is the process by which you take a low-acid food and you turn it into an acid food. And if you've ever home canned beans or vegetables, then you've created an acid food. Most vegetables are low-acid foods. The result when done properly is a safe, shelf-stable product. But when done improperly, the spores of a bacterium, Clostridium botulinum, can germinate, grow, and produce the most acutely lethal toxin known, botulinum toxin, and one where mere nanograms, an amount smaller than the naked eye can see, can cause death. One of the first speakers at the course was a gentleman by the name of Captain Calvin Edwards. And he recounted the story of a husband and wife, high school sweethearts, by the names of Sam and Grace Cochran. And it goes like this. It had been a hot, stifling day in Bedford Village, New York. And Sam and Grace Cochran thought, what better than a nice cool bowl of vichyssoise soup for dinner? Now, vichyssoise soup is traditionally served cold. So Grace cracked open a can of Bon Vivant vichyssoise soup and almost immediately noticed an off odor with it. Nevertheless, she brought a shallow bowl to Sam and asked if he thought something was amiss. Sam took a spoonful of soup and placed it in his mouth and immediately spit it out. Simultaneously, Grace placed her spoon to her mouth, and before putting it in her mouth, Sam stopped her and said, "I think the soup is spoiled. Let's have something else for dinner." Soon after, they ended their day. And the next morning, Sam awoke complaining of double vision. A few hours later, he had trouble moving his arms and legs. And by day's end, Sam was dead. Doctors were baffled. And it wasn't until Grace began to exhibit similar symptoms that they began to suspect botulism. After all, it had been over 40 years since they'd last seen botulism in the area. By week's end, Grace's life was narrowly saved. But left in the wake was a devastated family, a nation on pins and needles wondering if the soup in the cupboard would lead to their demise, and an industry teetering on the brink of collapse. Help was needed. So recognizing that process standards were very much in need, FDA was asked for assistance. And soon after, the low-acid canned food regulations were created. And shortly after that, regulations governing the production of acidified foods. The story of Sam and Grace was powerful, and Captain Edwards' training approach, effective. After completing the course, I returned to Florida to help train the 150-strong state inspectorate on how to perform this type of inspection. I recounted the story of Sam and Grace and of the Bon Vivant Company. By the way, if you visit the lobby, you'll see a glass display case, and within that display case, you'll see an actual can of the Bon Vivant vichyssoise soup. As chance would have it, about a year later, I was back in this room, but not as a state employee, but rather as FDA's lead training officer on the Conducting Acidified Food Inspections course. Important events have transpired in this room, not only for my career, but for the direction of our training. We're meeting here this week to discuss topics that are important to all of us. How can we improve our training program? Where can we find opportunities for collaboration? How can we leverage our resources? These are just some of the questions we'll begin to answer at our training summit this week. And it's with hope that about a year from now, we're back in this room, or maybe another one like it, sharing our stories of growth and collaboration as we continue our work towards achieving our part of an integrated food safety system. Today, I'd like to share with you information on Partnership for Food Protection's Training and Certification Work Group, who we are and what we're working on. But before doing so, and as someone who spent much of their career traveling and training, I wanted to take a moment to quickly discuss some of the materials in front of you, namely your folders. So if you look within your folders, you'll see a set of maps. There's a DHRD map, and it'll help you find locations that are close by to eat on breaks and during lunch. There's also another map for the Even Hotel for our guests who are staying there that identifies nearby eateries. A third map is for the DC Metro system. After all, DC is just a hop, skip, and a few metro stops away on the Red Line. You can check that out there. There's also a brochure right here. They'll help you stay connected with training and certification initiatives and also give you some information on the Training Summit goals this week. The fourth and final piece is the main curriculum framework, and I'll speak more on this later. Now, a few moments ago I mentioned that I spent a good portion of my career traveling and training. I always found it interesting to learn a little bit about the place I was visiting that I didn't already know. About half of us here today are local to Rockville. The other half are visiting. You may or may not know that Rockville was once known as Hungerford Tavern. As is the case with many places, over the course of years, the names of cities and towns change. In 1750, a man by the name of Charles Hungerford created a tavern bearing his name. It was an important place to socialize, share news and stories, negotiate business deals, and enjoy a little entertainment, all while having a beer, or 12. It was also a place to discuss politics, and George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, and many others considered Hungerford Tavern an important part of their lives. And in the coming years, this place helped fan the flames of revolution. On June 11, 1774, Hungerford Tavern hosted a group of Maryland patriots. And they wanted to protest Britain's new taxes and also proclaim support for the city of Boston, which had seen its harbor blocked after the Boston Tea Party the previous December. From their discussions came 5 declarative statements or resolutions known as the Hungerford Resolves. And one statement ranked above all the rest. It was a call for freedom and independence from Great Britain. A fairly significant statement, and one that was made a full 2 years before the Declaration of Independence, which is largely credited to another Hungerford Tavern patron, Thomas Jefferson. It's also a statement that allows us to meet here today to discuss another somewhat revolutionary topic in terms of training, and that's National Curriculum Standard Development. Before I speak more on that, I'd like to tell you about the Training and Certification Work Group and who we are. The work group is one of the original 3 Partnership for Food Protection work groups and got its start following a 2008 50-state meeting. Today it's made up of approximately 50 federal, state, and local food and feed investigators, inspectors. We also have a laboratory, and they also have knowledge on laboratory analysis. The group is advised by 4 co-chairs who in turn deliver regular updates and the products of the work group to the Governing Council. Our first co-chair is Stan Stromberg. Stan is a state member. Yep. I say that all the time when I introduce myself too. From the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, where he serves as the director. Stan is also the president of the Association of Food and Drug Officials, or AFDO. Jim Fear is a federal member from FDA's Office of Regulatory Affairs, Division of Human Resource Development, or DHRD, where he serves as the manager over the Integrated Food Safety Team, of which I'm a member of. Jim has spent much of his career working with federal, state, and local stakeholders, improving the quality of and access to training. Keith Johnson is a local member from the Custer Health Department in North Dakota, where he serves as the department's health administrator. Now, Keith and his team learned of some fairly significant news a few months ago. After being at the same location, the county courthouse, for over 60 years, they were asked to relocate their offices to accommodate the arrival of a new district judge, right? Yeah. Now, that seemed like a daunting task to find a new location in a short amount of time. However, as is the case much of the time, things turned out fine. They were able to find an even better location. I mention this story because taking on the development of National Curriculum Standard is by no means a small feat. It may seem like a daunting task, but I assure you that everything will be okay, and your input matters. In fact, it's essential and very much welcomed. Our final co-chair is Alan Bateson. Alan is a federal member and social science analyst here at FDA DHRD. By trade, he goes by a different title, and quite frankly, one I'd never heard of before, psychometrician IO psychologist. When I first heard that, I thought, this is certainly someone who deals with electric shock therapy on a day-to-day basis. Unfortunately, that's not the case at all. He just tests people and measures things. Not as exciting as I once thought, so we really don't talk much. Joking aside, Alan has a very important role in our work group. He is our certification expert who, among other things, helps validate the efficacy of testing in the workplace. We have all four of our co-chairs here today. Gentlemen, could you raise your hands? There's Keith and Stan and Jim and Alan in the back. I encourage you all to take a moment to say hello and meet with our co-chairs sometime this week. See if you can figure out who sings in a bluegrass band, and see if you can figure out who has a passion for visiting our national parks and probably has seen more of them than many of us combined. See if you can figure out who's an avid cyclist who's ridden their bike across the state of Iowa. And see if you can figure out who was a farmer before entering the regulatory profession. A challenge our work group faces, as do the other PFP work groups, is that we're spread all over the country in different offices across different time zones. In order to work towards completing our initiatives, we hold quarterly meetings, if not more often, with our members via conference call, through webinars, and when possible, face-to-face meetings. Since face-to-face meetings on a regular basis are not possible, most of our meetings take place online using a web conference tool called WebEx. We utilize WebEx to share news, updates, and discuss opportunities for participation, and we regularly post updates of those meetings and the minutes of those meetings to a site called Food Shield. How many of you are familiar with or use Food Shield? So quite a few of you, almost all of us. For those of you who are not familiar with Food Shield, it's a website which got its start largely from the laboratory community and their need for a searchable web-based directory of laboratories. Through discussions with USDA, FDA, the Association of Public Health Laboratories, and the American Association of Veterinary Laboratory Diagnosticians, Food Shield was born. At first, it acted largely like a directory. However, over the years, it's grown to do much more, and today there are over 200 work groups that utilize Food Shield to help share and review documents, present training, and keep members across all levels of government connected and informed. It's a comprehensive infrastructure supporting the protection and defense of our nation's food and agricultural resources, and it includes the scientific and technological diversities of the laboratory community. By now, you should have received a Food Shield invitation. In fact, I sent you another reminder this morning. If you have not already joined, I encourage you to do so. We'll use this site to stay connected and informed following our meeting this week. Now, the Training and Certification Work Group, as Pat and Barbara mentioned, receives their charges from the PFP Strategic Plan, which was released in November of 2014. The plan outlines the objectives for each of the work groups, beginning in 2015 and culminating in 2020. The plan identifies two major objectives for the Training and Certification Work Group, with the first being to recruit a diverse group of subject matter experts, or SMEs, to provide input on the development of a national curriculum standard for training. The second objective is to present a training summit, where stakeholders can meet to share the vision for developing a national curriculum standard for training integrated food safety system regulators using best practices in learning, to discuss development of curriculum, and find opportunities to continuously improve the quality of and access to our training. At our training summit today, there are 74 of you, representing various federal, state, and local departments, offices, and agencies, cooperative agreement grants, regulatory associations, institutions, and alliances. In fact, we have Rita Johnson here today, representing the Seafood Alliance. Rita also happens to be my former boss at the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Service, and the person who sent me to that Conducting Acidified Foods course I told you about earlier. Rita, welcome, and thank you for welcoming me to the Florida family and giving me a shot all those years ago. We also have with us some international partners. Where are our colleagues from Mexico? They're in the back there. Bienvenidos a la Cubre de Adiestramiento. And where are... Thank you. And where are our colleagues from Canada? In the middle there. Bienvenue au sommet de formation. And to all of you, welcome to our training summit. Now let's take a closer look at the work group's first objective, National Curriculum Standard Development. If you asked yourself, what does that mean? Then you're probably not alone, and it's a good question. When I look at this title, two words stick out for me, curriculum and standard. On their own, these are fairly common terms, but it's a good idea that we take a little closer look at these. A curriculum is simply defined as an aggregate of courses. In college, you may recall that you had to have a certain number of 100, 200, 300, or 400 level courses or hours for your major. This essentially was your curriculum. Now, standard is generally defined as something considered by most as the basis of comparison. So putting this all together, what do we mean in the context of training? We define National Curriculum Standard as a set of competencies essential for U.S. food and feed protection professionals across all jurisdictions to perform comparable regulatory activities within the integrated food safety system. Within this definition is another important term, competency, which is the measurable and observable knowledge, skill, ability, or behavior needed to do or perform the duties of the job. By creating a national curriculum standard, we're taking a big step towards creating a competent workforce doing comparable work. If you do a search of national curriculum standards, several results will populate. There are standards for social studies, math, science, and so on. Here we're talking about creating a curriculum standard based off competencies needed by food and feed regulatory professionals. When speaking about curriculum standards, one must also consider standards for training, as they very much go hand in hand. After all, what good is a curriculum if you don't have an effective method of delivery, and what good is training without having sound content to deliver? A search of national training standards again yields many results. There are standards for teaching assistants, firefighters, Canada, and so on. In our context, when we're speaking about training standards, we're really talking about the quality of our instructors and our delivery methods. Instructor skills training or instructor development workshops are a step towards establishing national training standards. There are several steps when working towards developing a national curriculum standard, with the first being to define the curriculum. For us, this came out of a building process that has its roots in the old ORAU schoolhouse, you can see here, and also Mel showed you before. It was originally defined by the work of SMEs from the Office of Regulatory Affairs and the Office of Resource Management, who developed a set of competencies that were later built upon through a broader set of SMEs, including those from the Training and Certification Work Group. Later, we partnered with the International Food Protection Training Institute, or IFPTI, to further refine the process and product. Tools such as needs assessments, job analyses, job task analyses, or JTAs, are used to define what competencies are needed for the development of the curriculum. Now that we define the curriculum, the next step is to build the curriculum. The work group is actively working on these first two steps. As we build and validate competencies, we can begin to develop training content towards those competencies, which will collectively become the curriculum. We can utilize tools such as gap analysis to measure whether existing training satisfactorily addresses the required competencies. Content that does not meet the requirements is revised so it does, and content that does can go directly into the curriculum. The next step is to implement the curriculum. You can look at this step as a prepackaged needs analysis. SMEs have already identified and validated the expected content and proficiency needed. There are design documents and style guides that have been created from this that provide a development training pathway. At this point, it's a matter of putting the work to practice by all of us. The final step, and the constant in the process, is to evaluate the curriculum. This step has a continuing presence in the improvement of the curriculum. By evaluating the effectiveness of the curriculum, we can identify ways to further improve upon it. Now, none of these steps are achievable unless we work together. The Partnership for Food Protections Training and Certification Work Group, IFPTI, FDA, and other federal, state, and local partners are working together to make a national curriculum standard for training our integrated food safety system regulators a reality. So, where are we today, and what does this work look like? Well, it looks a lot like this. This is the main curriculum framework. Feel free to grab it out of your folders. You have a copy. It has a lot going on, and it's taken the work of many people over the course of many months to create. Our next speakers, Jerry Waitola and Dr. Craig Camel, will give you much more information on the National Curriculum Standard history, process, and mainframe. But essentially what you're seeing are content domains representing competencies spanning 4 career levels: entry, advanced, technical, and leadership. It's from this framework that the national curriculum is being developed. Now, this concludes my presentation today. I hope you have a better understanding of the PFP Training Certification Work Group, who we are, and what we've been up to. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have in regards to the group now. Thank you. We've got a question in the back. Yes, sir.
Will, as the training certification work group members participated in the curriculum development process, did you notice that there were doubts about the process being successful?
That's a good question, and one at all that I wasn't expecting at all, coming from my boss. You know, it's a fair question, and to be honest, yes, there were doubts. And the doubts largely revolve around the process and not being familiar with the process. This has been a somewhat new avenue of learning for many of us. And going through the process with IFPTI has been eye-opening for many of us. And as we understand more about the process, we become more comfortable with it. So the doubts kind of faded away over time. So at first, yes, but as we progressed and began to build, and just using the diversity of our stakeholders, getting input from everyone, it's helped build a solid product where there is less doubt about it. And we're still in the building process of it, so there's always room for input, and we welcome that. So, if we can do it better, we want to hear it. Yes, sir.
I would add to your answer, which was having been there, not from the very beginning, but close to it, that all of the people that were there representing the different constituencies, that the trust level that grew over the time period contributed immensely. And the biggest example would be the feed people and the food people. And when we were able to bring those two groups together and have everything be feed and food, everybody seemed much more able to accept that this was really going to work.
Yes, very true. And thank you for not asking me to speak in French. Any other questions?
This one more, Will.
Yes, ma'am.
This is a gorgeous map of what we have, but if you're seeing it maybe for the first or second time, how do you recommend you digest this thing to get the most out of it? What's the best approach?
Right. Well, it very much builds, and it starts at the bottom, and our next speakers will really give you more information on that, so I don't want to steal their thunder. But it starts at the bottom with 25 general education competency or domains, which include competencies for that subject matter. And from that, it builds up. So there are 4 levels: the entry, advanced, technical, and leader. And as you work up, the content domains there are fewer of them. So the general knowledge is across the bottom, and as you master that, you work yourself up. And it's based on, your desire. If you don't want to be a leader, you may stay at a certain level, and that's totally fine. That's what people want to do, and that's entirely okay. But it builds up, and if you start at the bottom, and as you master that up, those courses or domains, you can see if the next step is right for you, and then you work your way up from there. Any other questions? We'll get a lot more on that following this presentation, so stay tuned. Everything you want to know about the main curriculum framework is coming up. All right. If there are no other questions, thank you so much.
Thank you, Leon.